Getting started, it's very exciting to be here with you today. And I will talk a little bit more about myself in a second, but I'm a former preschool teacher, so I'm very excited to be talking about preschool and kindergarten and the transition into kindergarten and elementary school. So we know that that is one of the most consequential transitions that our students will experience as part of their schooling experience. My colleague and I would love to introduce ourselves a little bit more before we get started. My name is Zachary Trail. I'm here with the amazing Julia Meyer, and we are client success managers at Second Step and Committee for Children. And I'll let Julia talk in a second a little bit more about what client success managers do. But before I was at Committee for Children, like I said before, I taught preschool in Chicago Public Schools where I live and work. And I did a lot of work in social emotional learning with students, as Julia has as well. So we are very passionate about the subject matter of our webinar today and would love to answer any questions that you have along the way. Julia?
Thanks so much, Zach. Yeah, I'm Julia Meyer. As Zachary shared, we are client success managers. So our role is to support you with the implementation of Second Step or any of our early learning products. I am also a former educator, spent some time in administration as well before coming to join Zachary here. So we are so glad you're here and hope you find something beneficial with your time with us today.
Thanks so much, Julia. Any questions that you all have, like I said, feel free to put them in the chat and Julia and I will respond. Um, yeah, we'll go ahead and move forward. So before we start talking about early childhood education and kindergarten transition specifically, I just wanted to talk a little bit about who we are as an organization. So our Second Step early learning kits, as well as all of our Second Step curricular products, come from Committee for Children, which is a nonprofit based in Seattle, Washington, with a mission to foster the safety and well-being of children through social emotional learning and development. Our curricular products are in use across all 50 states in the country, as well as several different countries around the world, and we reach approximately 25 million children with those products, which we are very excited about. But in addition to our curricular work, we also do a lot in terms of legislation and advocacy for families and children across our country. And if you're interested in hearing any more about that work or any of our other curricular products, you can feel free to visit us at our website, which is www.cfchildren.org. I also would like to take a moment as we begin our time together to discuss our commitment to equity as an organization. So this is our commitment to recognizing, condemning, disrupting, and seeking to rectify the systemic injustices that create barriers to our children's success. And one way that we do this at Committee for Children is by opening all of our webinar sessions with an acknowledgement that our regional offices in the Seattle area sit upon the unceded traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish tribe, the first indigenous peoples of the Seattle, Washington area. We hope that in paying homage to the original peoples of our region and our work in our webinars and other public-facing presentations, that we can encourage our clients to do the same and consider how they can pay homage to the indigenous peoples of their region in their work with children and communities. Over the course of our presentation today, we will discuss the developmental significance of the transition to kindergarten, and we will become familiar with the structure and content of the Second Step early learning transitioning to kindergarten unit, how you can use that in your classroom to introduce the topic of kindergarten with your students and help them ease their way through that transition. And by the end of the presentation, you should also be able to take away strategies for how to use Second Step early learning materials and other activities to support students' transition into elementary school. The first thing that we'll talk about today is the importance of SEL, or social emotional learning, in our students' transition to kindergarten. As early childhood professionals, we know that the transition to kindergarten is one of the most difficult transitions that our students will experience. It is, for many of our students, a fundamental change in their perception of school as an institution and how it relates to them, and what they will expect from their school experience moving forward. SEL skills, however rudimentary they are, will help them process this change proactively and positively. By the time the transition to kindergarten rolls around, which is coming up rather soon for those of you who are on the chat today, you probably will have spent your entire school year of preschool or other early childhood program teaching your students basic SEL that will benefit them as they get older and move through different grade levels. We hope that our Second Step early learning kit has helped in this instruction. If you or your educators have used that kit throughout the year, you will remember that it focuses on the social emotional competencies that are shown in this slide: self management and awareness of emotions, responsible and caring decision making, relationship and friendship skills, and lastly, social awareness, including feeling and showing empathy for other people. Young children with strong social emotional competencies in these five domains have been shown to be more likely to develop positive attitudes about school, have higher academic achievement in elementary school, and perhaps most relevant for us today, transition to kindergarten more successfully. Think for a moment and put it in the chat if you're comfortable. Which social emotional skills of the previous slide have you found to be most useful in the transition to kindergarten in students that you've worked with? Would it be self-awareness, self-management, relationship skills, social awareness, or responsible decision making? I'll give you a second to put that in the chat if you have one particular one that sticks out in your mind as being really helpful to your students in the past. I know that in my time as a preschool teacher, relationship skills were actually very important for the end of the year because it took a lot of trust for students to be able to transition from relating to their peers or to me as their teacher every single day and having a very close knit relationship to knowing that they could transition to seeing me and their peers less. Not every single day, only every so often as we pass ways in the school, but still know that that relationship had been worthwhile in their lives and that we could stay close and that they would still be very special people to me and their peers and vice versa, even when we couldn't see each other every day in the classroom. So the building of those relationship skills was significant, and kind of having that trust around changing relationships at the end of the year. Julia, is there anything that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I would have to echo what you're saying about relationship skills, but also I feel like as the year progresses, honestly, no matter what age the students are in school, we always see that growth in self awareness and within themselves. It is amazing to think back to the beginning of the school year and then comparatively where our students are at the end of the year. It's so impressive. We don't usually see it in the day to day, but really reflecting back, it's so impressive on how our students have grown with our support.
Most definitely. Yeah. And there's no way that they could transition into elementary school without those skills. So those are super important as well. Feel free to keep putting your ideas in the chat as we move along. And any questions, like I said, or ideas that you have moving forward, go ahead and share those as well if you're comfortable. So the first step in providing a clear and proactive support system for students transitioning into elementary school is understanding the kindergarten transition from their perspective, a student perspective. So research tells us that this is one of the most consequential and significant educational transitions that students will ever experience. And this is for a lot of reasons. The first is the difference between kindergarten and preschool or other early ed programs. As educators, we know that in many different places, kindergarten has become a less flexible learning environment over time. Schedules are more rigid, standardization and standardized testing often begin in kindergarten, and the pace and the pressure of the learning environment increases significantly. Now, there are different opinions around the developmental appropriateness of contemporary kindergartens, but almost everyone agrees that kindergartens can be very different from preschool and very suddenly so for our students. The significance of the kindergarten transition is also rooted in our students' developmental perspective of school as an institution. So for many students, their preschool classroom is the only school that they've ever known, the only teacher, the only classmates, the only physical space. Many students, especially our students who don't have older siblings, enter into preschool without much of an understanding that they will progress through grades as they get older, and that changing grades, switching peers in your classroom, maybe even switching school sites are all normal parts of their educational journey. That expectation and understanding needs to be explicitly taught to them, and the changes surrounding it can be difficult for them to process. They might be grieving the loss of seeing their teacher or their friends every day, or the comfort and trust that they built into their preschool learning environment. Teaching about the kindergarten transition proactively and helping students process their feelings around it can help ease stress for teachers, children, and families. So letting students and their families know what to expect from the transition in terms of timing and content, builds their readiness for all of those learning differences between preschool and kindergarten, and increases their academic achievement when they enter into elementary school. Furthermore, approaching that transition using a developmental model of support places emphasis on the collaborative relationships between the school, home, and community. Parents, guardians, and other members of a child's support system are right there with you in their excitement or maybe even their apprehension around elementary school. Our students will turn to them for comfort when they aren't with us, and we need to be mindful of their feelings around the transition as well. Our students' kindergarten transition might be the first one that's ever taken place in their family, or maybe they've gone through it before with older children. Previous transitions to elementary school might have been positive or negative experiences for their community, but at the end of the day, we don't know unless we ask, and we proactively include families in our support. The goals of all that proactive support to kindergarten should be to increase student knowledge of kindergarten, what it is, what it looks like, what it sounds like, how it's different from preschool, to empower students to use the listening and SEL skills that they acquired in preschool in kindergarten, to prepare students to leave their preschool classroom and teacher and bring closure to that departure, and then finally to empower parents and family members to assist students in that transition to kindergarten. All right, time for another discussion question. Hearing a little bit more about the transition to kindergarten, how students think about it, ways that you in your classrooms with your peer educators have approached it in the past. What strategies do you currently use in your classroom or school to help prepare your students for kindergarten? What's been effective? What's not been effective? What are your favorite things to do to help with the end of the year? I'll give you a moment to think and then put the answers in the chat if you're comfortable.
So we have a share in the chat from one of our attendees who was discussing one of their strategies is just to have open communication with the children and with the families, and just making sure those conversations are frequent, and making sure that they're being talked about in a positive light. And so making sure that it's not a discussion point that's scary, but more that it's exciting, that it's fresh on their mind, so that when they're ready, when they are in transition to kindergarten, those students really do feel more prepared.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you, Julia, for sharing it out. The earlier the communication, the better, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit more later in the presentation, but open and clear communication is the balm for everything. The balm for apprehension, fear around the kindergarten transition, fear of change, fear of a loss of relationships. The earlier that we can broach these topics with students and families, the more effectively we can support them through them. All right, so the first resource that I will talk about today in supporting your students and families through kindergarten transition is, of course, the Transitioning to Kindergarten unit that we feature in our Second Step Early Learning program. This unit, which is the fifth and final unit of the program, is shorter than the others and contains 3 weeks worth of lessons. These weekly themes of the lessons are learning in kindergarten, riding the kindergarten bus, and lastly, making new friends in kindergarten. The first week of the unit, Learning in Kindergarten, focuses on the importance of students bringing their second step listening skills into an elementary school classroom. It reinforces for them that other students that they might meet in kindergarten who don't come with them from their specific preschool classroom might not be familiar with these second step learning skills, but that our students have the ability and the power to remind themselves and teach other students how to listen and learn appropriately in kindergarten. The second week, Riding the Kindergarten Bus, uses riding the bus as an example of a situation that could cause new feelings and maybe even stress in kindergarten. It walks students through examples of how to use their second step social emotional skills to approach this situation as well as others. And then the last week, Making New Friends in Kindergarten, shows students ways that they can use Second Step's Fair Ways to Play in kindergarten. Now, you'll remember that the Fair Ways to Play are a list of specific strategies that preschoolers use to share, to solve conflict, to discuss any problems before it blows up into a lot of big feelings. And this unit, or this lesson within the unit rather, empowers them to use those skills specifically in contexts that are related to kindergarten. Hypothetical situations include sharing toys and books, calming down before solving social conflicts, and recognizing examples of students playing together well and kindly. All of these lessons within the unit contain the same materials as the other second step early learning lessons. So the first day of the week is that puppet script, where the puppets will walk through scenarios regarding kindergarten and the subject matter of the lesson. And then subsequent days include story activities, skill building practice, and a read aloud at the end of the week. Teaching these lessons over the span of 3 weeks will help you broach the subject of kindergarten and many situations and feelings that accompany it with students. There are, however, a lot of additional strategies that you can also employ over the final weeks of the school year to help prepare students. The first thing you can do is work to increase student knowledge of kindergarten as a learning environment. If you are in an elementary school setting where your preschool or early learning classroom is in the same building as kindergarten, you can find a time to welcome the students as soon to be kindergarten teachers to your classroom for a question and answer session or an art activity. You could organize a scavenger hunt of a kindergarten classroom, highlighting similarities and differences between that room and students' current learning environment. Cubbies and desks will always be big ones to highlight and point out. You can fill a week of story times with books about kindergarten, and these books could be including but not limited to The Night Before Kindergarten by Natasha Wing, which is one of my favorite ones, The Day You Begin by Jacqueline Woodson, or On the First Day of Kindergarten by Tish Rabe. And then after these story times, you can arrange your dramatic play center in your classroom with provocations and items relating to kindergarten stories. So students can enact their feelings and any potential situations that they're nervous about through their cooperative play with each other. As early childhood professionals, we also want to prepare our students to leave our care and to leave preschool in general. It's always great to create some sort of visual countdown to the end of the preschool year around 3 weeks before the end of the school year comes, so students can prepare themselves with a very physical and concrete reminder. A construction paper chain made with students and then removing one link per day works really, really well as linear calendars to count down to the end of the school year. This keeps students from being upset or emotional or surprised when goodbyes have to happen, and they can work up to it and understand and know that it's coming very proactively. During the last week of school, the grief around the end of preschool might be especially potent for both you and students. So you can read and discuss books about saying goodbye, but staying connected. Books like The Invisible String by Patrice Karst or Goodbye for Now by Madison Rowe. Art projects like painting or drawing are great for students to process their feelings or make cards for you and each other before the end of the year. And if you're able, it's always really fun to make scrapbooks with students containing their art or their projects from throughout the year to visualize, how much they actually have grown through preschool. The last thing we want to focus on during kindergarten transition, like I said before, is empowering our students as families. So before broaching the subject of kindergarten with students, you should definitely communicate with each family around their students' kindergarten enrollment. This will give you a good idea of which students might be staying in your building or which will be changing schools or moving. Always offer assistance to parents or guardians with any questions. As educators, we probably don't have all of the answers, but we do have tools and experience to empower families with information and strategies. In an elementary school setting, if possible, introduce students as families to their kindergarten teachers with a question and answer session or an open house. You can also give family members ideas for stories to read at home with students or loan out the kindergarten books that you're reading in class. If loaning books is something that you're not comfortable with, and trust me, I've been there. We can't always pay to replace all the books that are in our classroom. You can always invite parents or guardians to your classroom to read books with students using a sign-up list and following whatever your school's volunteer protocols are. Lastly, the home links that are included in the Second Step Early Learning Kit will give families ideas for at-home discussion prompts and activities to do with their students towards the end of the year. And those activities and discussion prompts will specifically relate to the themes and skills of those 3 transitioning to kindergarten lessons. All right, one last discussion question before we wrap up. Out of the things that Julia and I talked about so far, what is one kindergarten transition activity, inside or outside of Second Step, that you think would engage your students this year?
Zach, we already had someone dropping into the chat and
Awesome.
sharing that they loved the idea of doing the scavenger hunt in the kindergarten classroom. They thought that was a really good idea, and they think that their preschool students would really like that. So
Awesome.
thank you for sharing that out.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I agree. That definitely is great for preschool kids because, as we all know, the physical and concrete reminders and expectations of what they are going into will always help them process change. It'll be hard for them to kind of conceptualize what a kindergarten classroom looks like and feels like, how it's similar and different, just based on what we're telling them, because they're kind of like their non-concrete imaginative skills are not fully developed yet. And just imagining it based on the storybook will be a little bit abstract and difficult for them as well. So really showing them the kindergarten classroom and walking them through it will really help them process that change. All right, so a few last resources before we wrap up today. We, as always, would love to encourage you to join the Second Step Educators community on Facebook. Here you can connect with other Second Step program users who are implementing programs across the country, actively sharing their challenges and ideas. So you can ask questions of your peers, you can share resources, what's working for you, what your challenges are. It's a very supportive community of over 10,000 educators. And it's really exciting. So we have a lot of people on there who will ask for specific resources that maybe aren't included in the curriculum, but then someone else in another school halfway across the country has already built that out and will share it in the Facebook group. It's a very supportive and collaborative way to share ideas. And if you need any support with your Second Step curricula, including accessing the curriculum, finding different resources online, or just strategies for how to use it in your classroom, or any questions around site level implementation, you can feel free to reach out to our support team using the contact information that you see here. The most effective one is probably that email address. It will be easiest to use, support@secondstep.org. But if you feel like calling or visiting our website at all, you can definitely use all that information here in the slide as well. If you think of any later on, you can feel free to shoot that support@secondstep.org email, a message, and then they will put you in touch. They'll either fix your situation themselves or they'll put you in touch with your client success manager like Julia or I to have a conversation around implementation. All right, thank you so much for your time. It was fantastic to see you all here today. I hope that you gained some good ideas and some context around the end of the year in preschool. And I'm excited to hear how things go. So feel free to report back to us how your end of the year is going, how your use of Second Step is going, and if you have any questions for any of us at all, we're here to answer and help.